I'm going to call the Springfield City Council work session to order with a roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon,
Here.
Counselor Weber,
Here.
Counselor Moe,
Here.
Counselor Bradley,
Here.
Counselor Buck,
Here.
and Counselor Stout.
Here, thank you. All right, we have a couple of items for work session tonight, but the first one is Arts Commission applicant interviews with Mindy Linder.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Van Gordon. Good evening, councilors. This evening, I bring to you Arts Commission applicant interviews. The Springfield Arts Commission currently has one vacant position because unfortunately there weren't sufficient applicants during the last recruitment in 2025. The city received 2 applications for the one vacancy during our most recent recruitment for the Arts Commission, which closed on February 26th of this year. The current vacancy is one partial term position with an expiration date ending December 31st of 2029. So we ask that you interview the 2 candidates today, deliberate, and determine the appointment. So, first of all, we have Annalie Edwards.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Excuse me. So when you're ready, I can start asking the questions.
Fire away.
All right. Why are you interested in serving on the Arts Commission?
Sure. I would say that here recently, I've actually been going through my own arts journey. And I am just finding that arts and culture are what connects us in our humanity and invites conversations with others. And as a parent, introducing my children to arts and specifically arts in our community is a way to have those ongoing conversations and help build well-informed citizens.
Great, thank you. Could you describe your understanding of the role that you will be serving on as Arts Commissioner and how it relates to the work of the council?
Yeah. In reading about the Arts Commission, I know that there is a smaller budget to manage related to the Arts Commission and some grant opportunities to manage as well, and promote some events or manage some events like participating in the second Friday Art Walk and managing the gallery here in City Hall. I think there's also opportunities for, again, how do we engage our citizens in conversations about arts and human connections. And so I would expect that is also a part of the role of Arts Commissioner and working through that with the City Council.
Great, thank you. And what do you see as the current issues and challenges for the city of Springfield?
Right. I think like a lot of communities in our country right now, seeing each other as human beings is one item that I think is universal right now, and arts is a way to have those connections with each other on a very human level. And also in Springfield, I think we have a really beautiful space in downtown Springfield. We have done a wonderful job promoting the arts with our murals, and we have a lot of art-centered spaces in our community. But what I would like us to see is how do we engage our citizens in the process of art instead of just the outcomes of art?
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, Mayor and councilors, your second and final candidate for consideration, I'd like to welcome up Bridget Killen.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So why are you interested in serving on the Arts Commission?
Well, I don't come from a traditional arts background. And I'm a part of the LES cohort this year. And during the Arts and Culture Day last month, I was moved by the community in the arts culture because I think it helps shapes the community's identity and creating spaces where people can feel connected. I'm really excited to learn and bring a community and business perspective that could help connect more people and organizations to the arts to experience the movement that I did. The position that I'm in right now is I'm a recruiting manager for a staffing agency where I connect businesses, and I'm working with businesses and community leaders and professionals in the Springfield community, helping build those connections. And I feel that I could help the Arts Commission build those connections as well. And also just on a personal level, I've seen how art can support mental health. And I also have a loved one who struggles with mental health challenges. So, and art has been incredibly therapeutic and grounding for that individual. So, I just feel that art gives people a way to express themselves and connect with others that they normally wouldn't get.
Could you describe your understanding of the role you will serve on as Arts Commission and how it relates to the work of the council?
Yes, community engagement, and then also dealing with limited budgets, so gaining more business partnerships and sponsorship opportunities, and then hopefully creating fundraisers and making art accessible and welcoming to the entire community.
And what do you see as the current issues and challenges for the city of Springfield?
Well, so I think that the community engagement, and then also making art accessible and welcoming to the entire community. I think that there could be a lot more outreach with residents in Springfield, and then also business partnerships.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, so you've heard the two candidates. We do have two candidates for one vacancy. The commission does believe that each candidate is qualified. They both reside in Springfield, and we ask that you deliberate and determine an appointment this evening.
All right, great. And I will look for just a head nod from them. I know on your application, I believe you both said you might be interested in serving on the museum committee too. Is that still accurate? Okay. All right. Thank you. So we have one position for Arts Commission tonight. I don't know who wants to dive in here. Councilor Rodley.
Thank you both for coming out. You're both fantastic, and I cannot wait to find places for both of you to volunteer in Springfield. For this particular one, I'm going to put Annalee first and then Bridget second for me.
Councilor Mo.
I would vote the same way.
Councilor Buck.
I also really appreciate both of you guys. I think you guys are both very qualified. I will vote the opposite of my colleagues and put Bridget first and Annalee second. Both very, very qualified. I very much appreciated your comments on mental health.
I will vote for Annalee first and Bridget second, and thank you again for coming out.
Councilor Weber.
Just to make this a little easier on everybody, both applicants are really, really qualified and would love to see them both working on committees for the city. So I will go with my colleagues' majority here and say Annalee first, but I would ask the question if we can pull Bridget forward for consideration into the History Museum as well.
All right, we'll work through this one step at a time. So Mindy, if I believe the answer is Annalee. If you can move that forward to the regular session so we can get that appointment done.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor and Councilors.
Thank you. All right, the next one is the Springfield History Museum Advisory Committee interviews. Oh, with Emily. I guess Maddie's not here. You're pinch hitting.
Indeed, I am, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Emily David, Director of the Museum and Library, here for Maddie McGraw and the Museum Committee tonight. So the Museum Committee had, as of December 31st, had 3 openings. Patty Sage reapplied for a second term and was directly appointed. So we had 2 applicants for the 2 remaining open positions. Devin Lawson could not be here tonight, but Marta Haycock is here to interview.
So, one question I do have is if we're going, and maybe this is a city attorney question, if we're going to interview, if we want to consider somebody else from a different committee pool, do we have to pull them up and interview them again, or can we just deliberate towards?
That's at the council's prerogative, so you can decide whichever you'd like to do.
Perfect. So, do you guys want to talk to Bridget again, or you guys are really decisive tonight on interview?
I mean, I'm happy to hear from Bridget again. The role would be different, and maybe she would have some different perspective on that if we wanted to look at that. But I feel like she gave us some good perspective as well on the art council, but maybe it's different.
All right. So why don't we do this? Why don't we get the first one done, and then we'll have her up again.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the first applicant is Marta Haycock.
Wow. Hi,
Hello. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Could you tell us why you're interested in serving on the museum committee?
Local history has always been really important to me and really interesting. I come from like 6 generations.
Could you lean forward closer to the microphone, please?
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Oh, perfect.
Better, okay.
Outstanding.
Okay.
Thank you.
Local history has always been really interesting to me. I come from 6 generations of Oregonians. I volunteered at the Hollyford Art Museum in Willamette, and I did a lot of work up in Alaska with local historical initiatives. And I would love to have an excuse to spend more time in downtown Springfield.
The Springfield Museum has a rotating exhibit space. One of the roles of the committee is to make recommendations for exhibits and programs. Can you give us an example of an exhibit you might recommend?
Yes, I have several, but the first one is I would like to explore the possibility of doing a partnership with Timber Point Assisted Living, an oral history project where we would develop a video library of memories of Springfield. It's my understanding that a lot of the residents of this facility have deep roots in this area. And it could be something that we could make available to the schools and their history department so students could learn firsthand.
And how do you think the work of the Springfield History Museum improves our community?
Oh, excuse me. I think that museums, small museums like this, tend to help create a cohesive community narrative. Kind of, as long as there's something that involves the whole community. Everything but from kids to elders.
All right, that was the last question I had.
Okay, you're done with me? Excuse me.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you for listening to me.
All right. we're gonna bring Bridget back up unless. Thank you for being flexible and letting us put you on the spot here.
Totally fine. Happy to.
Okay. So could you talk a little bit about your interest in serving on the museum committee?
Yes. I don't have traditional museum experience or knowledge, but I am eager to learn and willing to gain that experience in serving the community.
And the Springfield Museum has a rotating exhibit space. One of the roles of the committee is to make recommendations for exhibits and programs. Can you give us an example of an exhibit you might recommend for the museum?
I cannot know.
That's you know,
I wasn't a little bit prepared for this meeting, so apologies.
no. How do you think the work of the museum improves this community?
Well, I think it's can you repeat that?
Sure. How do you think the work of the Springfield Museum improves the community?
Well, I think that the museum shows the community what Springfield is all about and what Springfield can grow to be, which is a great community. I mean, in the last 10 years, there's been huge developments in Springfield, just alone.
All right. Thank you. We promise not to call you back up for another random.
It's okay. It's a great learning experience. Thank
so
you.
much. All right. So we filled one.
Yes.
We're moving that person forward automatically as a reappoint. We've got two more to fill. Could you maybe fill us in on the status of Devin?
So there's just one more to fill. So there were two applicants for two positions. The third open position was filled by Patty Sage, the reappointment. So yes, so there's two positions to be filled. Devin couldn't be here tonight, but is interested in interviewing at a later date if possible.
Okay. And this might be a point my recommendation would be that we at least hold the interview over until and reschedule for part of it. I mean, I think we can appoint a person tonight depending on what people want to do. It sounds like we gave them the information late.
Yes.
So it might be helpful to reschedule that piece. Councilor Rodley.
Thanks. I'm fine with rescheduling. And but I want us to remember to give Bridget some extra points for being super flexible and willing to come up and just do it on the fly. I have a great respect for that. And I'm happy recommending Marta for the other position.
Councilor Weber.
I agree. I'm comfortable moving Marta forward for tonight, and very much appreciate Bridget being so flexible and willing to come up and sit in the seat unprepared. What date do we think we will hold this interview for Devin to?
Signaled from the scheduler that the 13th.
13th. Okay. So we would just need Bridget to be flexible and wait for us to interview Devin on the 13th and come to that decision. So.
Anybody else? Councilor Buck.
Yeah, I concur, and I just want to encourage you, Bridget, to come back and see us again on the 13th. I think that having not in the not so distant past been in those shoes, having to be flexible, that's really hard, and I appreciate that. And I think you're a really strong candidate here. I'm comfortable moving Marta forward, but I also am really interested to see you back on the 13th.
I'm getting a thumbs up for Councilor Stout.
Thumbs up to what my colleague said, but I do need to shout out to Marta to say the idea just totally tugged at my heartstrings. I loved it. Thank you.
Okay, so yes to Marta.
Okay.
Reschedule for the 13th, and then we will somehow find time.
Okay, very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, looks like the last set of interviews, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee interviews. And you are not Emma Newman.
No, I'm also pinch hitting tonight.
This is amazing.
Well, Emma is out sick, so here I am. I'm Sandy Belson, the Comprehensive Planning Manager. And so I am here to present 7 applicants to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We have 3 openings on this committee. And so do you want me to come up each time in between, or you can just call them up? Yes. Okay. So the first one will be Nard Clark.
Hello, I'm Nard Clark.
Thanks for joining us this evening.
Oh, thank you.
What strength or skills would you bring to the BPAC?
I moved here about 2.5 years ago from Colorado. In Colorado, I was on the governor's transportation board in the position of pedestrian bicycle advisory board. I am a member of the Venture Cycling Association. I'm a member of the Bicycle League of American Bicyclists. I was in El Paso County for a period of time and was on the advisory board of the Bicycle Council there. And before that, I was in Fremont County and on the Bicycle Advisory Board in that county also.
And how do you think the work of the BPAC improves our community?
I think it's a matter of people getting around. People getting around is what makes a community. It's interaction, it's communication, it's how we move. If we can move by walking and bicycles, it's far easier than a car, and people talk to each other more. In a car, you're in a sealed container and you're just racing down the road and just dodging everybody. When you're walking on a bicycle, you're saying hi on the paths and on the sidewalks, and you're interacting and you're finding you're part of a community. And I think that's extremely important.
And if you could make one positive change in Springfield, what would it be?
I would like to see, I also work with kids on bikes, and I don't see that many kids riding in the safe routes to school. I don't see that many kids riding to school. All the schools I teach in, and I teach in some in Springfield and some in Eugene, and there's not a lot of kids riding their bikes to school, and I think that's a shame. We do have bike paths here, but they're not being used. So I don't think they're lined up to be useful for the kids, or they don't feel safe enough. So I think we need to spend some more time looking for the community to find the routes so that people will use the routes more and more kids will riding to school. It'll be healthier. It'll save parents time. It'll make kids happier, more attentive, and make them healthier themselves. And it'll make the air cleaner to breathe.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The next interview I have is Marshall Curry. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor.
What strengths or skills would you bring to BPAC?
Mayor Van Borden, councilors. My name is Marshall Curry. I've been a longtime resident of Springfield. And I just want to start by saying thank you for honoring safety for everyone as they use the system by having this committee and by having these interviews and other actions you've taken recently. Also, thank you for opening the qualifications up to the urban growth boundary, as reside in the urban growth boundary, and I applied a couple years ago and was unable to fill this role because of that policy, and I appreciate the policy change to be able to participate in this manner. I have extensive experience in this work. I've been on volunteer committees in the past with the Alumni Association for the Ford Scholar Alumni Association, which is a part of the Ford Scholar Roseburg Forest Product Foundation. I've worked all over the country with universities and local governments in work of an organization called Epic N, where we documented university student projects led by faculty, improving BPACs all over the country and the globe. And I'm an active community member. I've been participating through LiveMove when I was at the University of Oregon, and the Safe Routes to School program, volunteering in our schools and helping folks walk to school on a walking bus route to one of our local schools. I've met many of our Safe Routes to School coordinators through the years and have always been impressed and motivated by them to do more to make it safer for folks to use our streets. I've also lived in different cities up and down the I-5 corridor, so I've seen what it's like to live in different places with different models for active transportation. I follow many well-respected bike and active transportation channels on different media outlets to learn more about what we could do in our city. And for years, I've closely followed this committee and the work in the region. I can't wait to get back on my bike and ride Mill Street more. I've had a recent knee injury and really look forward to testing out some of the new improvements. My kids are active users. My other family members are users. And now, after my recent job change, I have a couple of years of public sector work experience that I look forward to applying to this committee if I am selected for the role. So that way my grandkids can have the same joy on the system as I'm having with my kids.
And how do you think the work of the BPAC improves our community?
I think BPAC creates safety and comfortable alternatives to driving, and it's an embodiment of liberation. By working through the BPAC priorities and the active transportation plan, which I believe is a part of the work to come for this committee, we will continue making movement through our city easier. That means more people interviewing for jobs, more people spending time with their kids, exercising, less wear and tear on our roads, which means more money for other projects, and just a more vibrant city core, which we've continued to see expand. This is the work that supports us. Many of you might in the future have an injury or have a family member who's unable to walk. BPAC is the way that we're able to keep our family and our neighbors safe as they cross the street if they're hearing impaired or if they're sight impaired and they need to use certain hearing devices to get across the street. It's crucial to our success.
If you could make one positive change in Springfield, what would it be?
I have to share an idea from my son who gave it to me this morning. If we could give everyone vests and have them walking around the streets during the commute to school and the commute back from work, it would make things a lot safer. More seriously, I think I'd love to launch Bike Share, giving folks access to free transportation methods that can save their time, saves us all efficiency and value. There's probably other ideas out there, but I think those are the two I'd stick with. Thanks. Thanks, Mayor Van Gordon. Thank you, councilors.
Thank you so much. The next interview person is Beverly Floyd.
Hello. Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
What strengths or skills would you bring to the BPAC?
Okay, I've been thinking this over. I think honestly the number one, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think the number one strength I bring is so I don't really have any experience working in transportation or planning, but I am really passionate about active transportation and transportation as, or like transportation equity. So I think I would bring a lot of passion to the committee. I have lived much of my adult life until a few years ago without a car, initially for financial reasons. I lived in South Korea up until 5 years ago and had no need for a car there. So moving back here after living in a city that was highly accessible by bus, foot, or bicycle, I mean, I had experience living here without a car, but it really made me see how much better our cities could be, and how much work we have to do. I have friends and family members who can't afford to drive, and I worked at Oregon State Hospital for about 3.5 years. So I worked with a lot of people who will be re-entering the community and likely won't be able to drive for various reasons. So I think I just have a huge passion for transportation as an equity issue. I want to see just better infrastructure for walkers. I'm a recreational cyclist, but I also want to see more people using cycling as a form of commuting, just so we can have a healthier and safer community where everyone can get around regardless of financial situation, ability or disability. I think that's the number one thing I bring.
And how do you think the work of the BPAC improves our community?
I think it's really important to have community members offering a voice on, like, people who are actually using the streets in different ways. It's nice to have people from different parts of the community able to provide their input, so that the people who we have working in planning and transportation planning are more aware of areas that are maybe highest priority for improvement. And also, so we have people who are part of the community who are able to do outreach in their day-to-day lives, and get more people excited about riding bikes and traveling on foot. And I know you guys have, or I know the committee has done a lot of work advising the transportation planning department on various projects that are in the works. I'm really excited about the Virginia Daisy Street connection because I live on that side of town. Yeah, it's just really exciting to see things. I know it's a lot of work has gone into the current planning. And I'm appreciative of the current committee members and just want it to be a strong committee with a lot of voices.
If you could make one positive change in Springfield, what would it be?
Probably traffic calming measures all around. Even though my preference is for cycling and walking, I am kind of forced to drive a lot. And I think that providing alongside like developing our bike and walking infrastructure, I think traffic calming is kind of like the first thing you can do to get everyone on board with it. Drivers want safer streets. Creating safer streets for drivers and pedestrians and bikes at the same time is really important to me. Yeah, I was really sad to hear about the Main Street Safety Plan kind of dissolving. So yeah, if I could just create safer streets for everyone with the wave of a wand, that's what I would want to do.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next person I have is Sean Maxwell.
Hello.
Hi. Hello. What strengths or skills do you bring to BPAC?
I have a history of bicycling as a primary form of transportation up until I moved to Oregon, really. I'm from Pennsylvania. I went to college in Philadelphia. That was my primary form of transportation there. Moving to Eugene in 2013, I lived out in West Eugene towards the wineries, and biking was only a recreational thing out there, not a form of transportation. I've been in Springfield since 2019. And I think there's a good biking infrastructure here that maybe isn't used as much as it could be. So education for folks to know what's available to them already is one of the things I like to focus on. Did that answer the question?
Yeah. How do you think the work of BPAC improves our community?
Having residents involved in our biking infrastructure and giving input is critical. I think as the city grows, it's important for this specific group to make sure that the bicycle infrastructure isn't forgotten, and some of the areas that are bike friendly now but don't have particular bike infrastructure, as the population grows, could maybe need specific focus that will no longer really be friendly to bikes just because there'll be more people, more cars, more everything.
If you could make one positive change in Springfield, what would it be?
More access points between South 8th Street and the Mill Race path for biking, and then also a path in collaboration probably with some other groups to Lane Community College.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next person that I have is Nathaniel Burnett.
Good evening.
Hello. What strengths or skills do you bring to BPAC?
I grew up in Springfield. I remember riding around on the D Street trails on the hot summers and swimming in the river. Moved away after high school to jumpstart my career and then moved back about 10 years ago. During that time, I lived car-free for over 5 years, and I'd commute to work, commute to meetings, downtown, around town, anywhere I needed to go to pick up groceries. One of the major problems I ran into during that time is finding bicycle parking. And so what I did is I created an application called the Bicycle Parking Project. And with that app, I can keep track of where all the bicycle parking is around town and report it if it's broken or needs attention. And anyway, I think through my experience and my technical skills, I can bring that to BPAC and try to help use that data to help improve infrastructure and identify areas that need more bicycle parking and things like that.
And how do you think the work of BPAC improves our community?
I think it has been amazing. As I mentioned, I grew up here, so I'm familiar with the D Street trails. And since then, the bike trails and bike lanes and bike routes around town have just improved immensely. So any way that those trails can be interconnected and improved is great for the community.
And if you could make one positive change in Springfield, what would it be?
For me, it'd be the interconnectivity. I like to feel safe while I'm biking. I have two kids, so I want them to be safe while they're biking. If we have trails that go to the parks, trails that lead to grocery stores, trails that lead to schools, then everyone would feel safer. And I think that's an important part.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
The next person I have is Tessa Carbum.
Good evening.
Thanks for hanging in there with us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
What strength or skills would you bring to BPAC?
Yeah, I have lived in the area for about a decade now, and in that time, I've have a range of experiences, both as a long distance runner, running on our trails and our roads, as a cyclist, both, recreationally and commuting for school and work, and as a motorist as well. So I think just that experience there, and along with my work as a public school teacher, I think I have practice interacting with the public and working with a range of people from the community, and would like to continue that work.
How do you think the work of the BPAC improves our community?
Yes, I think the work of the BPAC makes our community safer. I think it quite literally connects our community with the trails and roads that we have. In addition, creating community spaces for us to interact and work with each other.
And if you could make one positive change in Springfield, what would it be?
Yes, in my time here, I've seen Springfield grow so much, and it's a place that I'm proud to call home and continue to call home. So, as Springfield continues to grow, I think allowing more community spaces, building more community spaces, as well as creating more opportunities for connection, is something that I would like to do, and getting that input from the community of where we want to take this beautiful city next.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then William Carroll.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. What strengths or skills would you bring to BPAC?
Yeah, since I was in high school, I've been getting to school and work by bike or walking or taking the bus, and that continued on. I moved to Japan and lived there for nearly a decade, and same thing, continued using a bike, walking bus and the train. And coming back to Oregon at the end of 2024, I thought that, how was I going to get around without a car? And I realized, you can get around so easily here by bike and on foot. And that, those different experiences of using active transportation, not only here, but also in other countries, I'd like to bring that, those varied experiences to the committee. Also, I work with the organization that manages the local bike share system. And so I have experience as both a casual user of infrastructure here, but also as someone who's uses it professionally and in a more formal setting. So I would like to bring that experience as well to the committee.
And how do you think the work of BPAC improves our community?
Well, one of the most important things for people is to have access to their community, and how you have access is by having mobility. And, two of the easiest ways to get around are on foot or by bicycle. So the work of the BPAC, helps people have access to the community around here. And one of the great things about walking and cycling is that, you're able to greet your neighbors, create a community, exchange ideas, exchange opinions, and that creates a more close-knit group of people here. Also, the health benefits and the environmental benefits of cycling and walking, provide a community where people are close and exchanging ideas, but also enjoying the health and benefits of those modes of transportation.
And if you could make one positive change in Springfield, what would it be?
It's been tough because I've came back at the end of 2024 and I've been enjoying my time here quite a bit. It's been really nice. And it's hard to think about something that I would change, but thinking about this the other day, there's a lot of great restaurants I like going to out in East Springfield. And when I drive out there and driving back, I was thinking, man, I saw someone cycling down Main Street and I was like, man, I wish I had that level of confidence. And I would like to see, improvements in safety so people can feel more comfortable accessing that side of Springfield by bike.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we've got through 7 interviews. So it's 3 folks for 7 interviews, 3 folks.
That's correct.
Do we have anything strange? Are they all full terms? Do we have any?
Yeah, they will all be full terms.
Okay. So I'm going to start clear back down on Andrew and get his top 3, and then we'll see how we're going here.
Wow. I get to be first? Nice.
There's
my top 3 are Nard, Sean, and Tessa.
Nard, Sean, Tessa. Alan?
Nard, Beverly, and Nathaniel.
Michelle?
This is not an easy decision, let me tell you. I would go with Nard and Beverly and William.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I feel like we could seat a committee with the folks in this room. I'm so excited that there are this many folks who are passionate about bicycle and pedestrian stuff. So don't give up. If you don't make it on the committee, don't give up. I have Nard, Marshall, and Tessa as my top 3.
My turn?
Yep.
Okay. I have Nard, Beverly, and Sean.
Okay.
and they're all good.
They are very good. Yeah. So I have Nard as a yes. I have Beverly as a yes. And it looks like we have, oh, I know, we got 2 for Sean, 2 for Tessa, 1 for Marshall, and 1 for William. And I'm going to keep a look at my official.
2 for Sean and Tessa. So it's the.
Does anybody else want to negotiate here? Change the vote? All right. So if we can move Tessa forward, please.
All right, thank you very much.
It was a great group.
Yeah, it was fantastic. That was a hard decision, and those are the kind of what we want. Thank you guys all for coming out.
Okay. Right. Lastly is the mandated housing planning with Sandy and Katie. This does not sound like a dense topic at all. Yep.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Again, my name is Sandy Belson. I'm a comprehensive planning manager. And with me tonight is Katie Carroll, and I would like to announce that this is her first day as senior planner for the city of Springfield. So she's gotten a promotion from housing analyst to be a senior planner. She was scheduled to be on the agenda tonight anyway, but now she gets to take the lead for this project going forward. So,
Hang on 1 second, Sandy. We have a comment
I
from
have
the
a comment.
gallery.
Does that mean you're abandoning my housing team?
No, because
Okay.
we'll still be working on this stuff. So
Yay, just more of you. I love it. Thank you.
We were, we're about 30 seconds from this totally getting off the rails about what perks do senior planners get, right? Like, you better get us back on track, Sandy.
So Chelsea Hartman had been the one starting off on this project, and she moved over to the city manager's office. So we had the opportunity to move Katie into this position, and she'd already been working with Chelsea on housing issues, following the rulemaking process, providing input on legislation and rulemaking. And so she's well positioned to be able to take the lead in this project. And so I'm going to turn it over to her tonight, and she can show you how capable she is.
all right, thanks, Sandy. Allison, thank you. Okay, so it's not a very exciting title, but tonight we're going to be talking about the mandated housing planning that the city is beginning to work on and that we'll be doing for the next several years. We've mentioned to you multiple times in the last few years that this was coming up, but we've been in a little bit of a flux state as new legislation and rulemaking unfolded that impacted what our requirements were. Oh, okay, cool, thanks. So before I get into the new requirements, just want to give you a little bit of background. So Oregon cities have been required to plan for their community's housing needs under the statewide planning goal 10 since the inception of the statewide planning program in the 1970s. To do that, the cities have periodically inventoried their buildable residential lands within their urban growth boundaries to determine if they have sufficient capacity to accommodate the housing that they'll need for the next 20 years based on population projections. So this image on the screen is showing what that process used to look like. So cities used coordinated population projections to determine their future housing needs, but otherwise this analysis was done totally locally. If a city found they didn't have enough land within their UGB to accommodate the housing that they determined they would need, then the city would need to take steps to accommodate more housing on their existing lands through actions like upzoning or height increases, for example, so things to grow up, or look at expanding their urban growth boundary to grow out. And Springfield last completed and adopted this analysis in 2011 to cover the years 2010 through 2030. And I'll talk a little bit more about the results of our last study in a bit. And so this is the process now. So as you all are aware, the state legislature has been doing a lot of work to address Oregon's housing needs in the last few years, and it's also been one of the governor's top priorities. So there have been a series of legislative changes and rulemaking processes that have gotten us to this point, which are the rules that we will need to follow for the next several years to comply with our Goal 10 housing planning mandates. And this new process is called the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, or ONA. The rules for this were just adopted by the Land Conservation Development Commission in December. As Sandy mentioned, we followed the rulemaking process, but still familiarizing with the finalized rules, and we have some outstanding questions, and there's forthcoming guidance from DLCD, so there may be things that we can't answer for you tonight. And I will talk a little bit more about the rulemaking process in a moment. These new rules overall have changed existing processes. They've added new requirements on, and they've increased the role of the state in local housing planning. And I'm just going to briefly go through the various steps that we'll need to undertake so that you know it's coming, but the rest of tonight mostly will be focused on what's happening in the next 2 years, because this work is going to stretch out over several years. So looking at this image, starting in the top left corner, the first change is that the state is now setting housing production targets for cities rather than this calculation being done locally. So those targets are broken out by the number of units that we need at various income levels. And the targets that the state provides to us will determine how many housing units we need to plan for, and it will also inform what kind of housing we need to plan for. From there, moving right on the top part of this image, cities need to conduct what's called a contextualized housing needs analysis. So this is a new requirement that supplements those state-provided production targets, and it builds on them by providing a more localized assessment of our current and future housing needs, as well as fair housing considerations. And this informs multiple other steps in the process, so I'll come back to it a little bit later to talk about what's involved in it. And then next will come the housing capacity analysis, and that is kind of closest to what we used to do for this work. And that's where we will inventory our supply of buildable residential lands within the urban growth boundary, compare it to the number and the types of housing units we'll need for the next 20 years, and then identify whether Springfield has enough land to accommodate that housing, and if not, where we have insufficiencies. And then moving to the top right-hand corner of that image, we will then need to do a development ready lands inventory. So this is a new step. It is informed by the buildable lands inventory that we do for the housing capacity analysis, and it requires us to identify the subset of our buildable lands that can support new housing in the near term. And then moving all the way down to the bottom right-hand corner of that image, then we'll do a housing production strategy. And the housing production strategy responds to all these various pieces prior to it in an action plan that focuses on what the city will do that is within its control to promote housing production, affordability, and choice in the near term. And for Springfield, that near term is an 8-year period. So it'll be an 8-year action plan. And if we conclude in our housing capacity analysis that we don't have enough land to meet our housing needs, or if we identify that we don't have enough development ready lands, then our housing production strategy will need to identify what we can do to make more buildable lands available and or make more land available for ready for development. And then the production strategy will also include actions to promote the housing that we need where we need it. So that could include more efforts related to income qualified housing, promoting homeownership, making it easier to build middle housing, et cetera, et cetera. And then from there, down in the bottom middle part of image, cities become responsible for implementing the actions that they identified in their housing production strategy. And at the halfway point, which for us would be 4 years after our housing production strategy is adopted, then cities get evaluated by the state relative to their peer cities on their progress towards housing production. And so some cities, based on how they're performing relative to peer cities, will be referred into this housing acceleration program, where the state will audit the cities and determine what else can be done to better meet their housing production targets. And I see you prepping for a question there.
I am so glad our partners in the state are here to help. Councilor Rodley.
Let's see if you can bring us back after this. I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking, I'm so glad they listened to all that lobbying we did to not make any major changes while we were catching up to the previous changes. But I'm gonna, like a good stoic, we're just gonna move forward. Is there any opportunity, like who is going to be making the decision? Is there any opportunity for us to weigh in on those decisions around the targets, or is it just going to be like some people in a closed door or over a glass of wine saying, here's what Springfield needs to do?
So the method, there was rulemaking around the methodology for the targets, and I'm looking to Sandy, but I believe we did provide comment on that. So at this point, unless there are changes, that is the methodology that we're working from. And I'll talk a little bit more too when we get into the numbers about what they are and what's behind them. But there was a process.
I will wait and ride along with you on this one.
Just why Tillamook is in this slide?
I think that they lobbied for themselves to be included.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's correct. So these rules generally apply to cities over 10,000, but the exception is those small cities in Tillamook County are also subject to the same rules.
And then everybody in Metro.
Right.
Keep going.
Okay, great. So what I will say about the housing acceleration program is that the way that the rules are written, the state can then step in and require us to take actions if we're not meeting our targets. But the other thing that the rules allow for is for the state to step in and provide technical assistance and other resources. So whether those resources exist at the time, TBD, but there is room in the rules for that.
And when you say meeting our targets, you mean physical units built.
Correct.
So we are going through a process over 8 years that has nothing that is just about our regulatory authority, but we're held accountable to how many physical units are built, even though we're not going to build any. We don't actually put a shovel in the ground.
Yes, and that is kind of the big challenge with these. So, and then as you can see, these arrows just keep going around. So this new, this ONA paradigm of planning is intended to be a cyclical process. So we will need to undertake this on a more regular cycle. And for non-metro cities like Springfield, that's every 8 years. And so our original deadline, as some of you may recall, for doing this planning has been pushed out. And that was because the rulemaking was just ongoing. There was rulemaking and then new legislation and then new rulemaking. So anyways, we are finally now at the point where we have deadlines and we're beginning to do this work. So our housing capacity analysis will be due at the end of 2027. Our housing production strategy will be due at the end of 2028. And we are right here at the beginning. So we have our allocations and ready to start doing the work. So to some of these comments, questions around the state mandates and the rulemaking, DLCD did go through multiple rulemaking processes to get to this set of rules. We did stay engaged with that and provided public comment at multiple points during the rulemaking processes. I think I want to say at least 5 times in the last couple of years, to try and make the rules more feasible for cities to implement. And the mayor did also submit comments on the final draft rules. Our input was similar to that of the League of Oregon Cities and other cities that commented. Overall, concerns were focused on how prescriptive the rules are, that the prescriptiveness will not necessarily improve housing production results, and that there's a lack of resources to implement these requirements, especially on the timelines that the state has set. The input from the cities did have some impact on the final rules, though, so I did want to highlight a few of the concerns that we raised that were addressed in the final rules. So the first one is that the draft rules included several what DLCD called minimum standards and rebuttable presumptions. So these were things that cities would have been required to do or to assume in planning unless they could successfully argue how they were already doing it or could meet something in a different way. And we had concerns with the lack of flexibility in that approach, and also that there did not appear to be a clear path for us to make an argument. And luckily, the final rules made all but one of these into safe harbors instead, which means that they are now totally optional tools for us. The state also created a model code for housing based on legislative direction, and that got wrapped up into this minimum standards rebuttable presumptions thing. And so that now is also just an optional tool, that model code. And then the draft rules required us to use our housing production targets from the year our housing capacity analysis was due. And that was a concern for us because many cities, including Springfield, could not begin and finish that work in 1 year, which would have meant that we would have done a lot of work and then had to redo it for very minor changes. So luckily that was also changed in the final rules to give us some more flexibility there. However, there are ongoing challenges with the rules that were adopted. So I'm also going to highlight a couple things that we had raised concerns about that weren't changed in final rules. So one of them is that we asked for exploratory work to count as an action in that housing production strategy action plan, because understanding how to most effectively implement things often requires initial work like feasibility studies. And unfortunately, those do not count in our housing production strategy. So our housing production strategies will have to be things that we are committed to adopting and implementing. There's also some interplay between these rules and climate-friendly area requirements. So as you guys probably recall, climate-friendly areas rules require us to accommodate at least 30% of our housing need in a climate-friendly area. Well, these rules add on that if we need to expand our urban growth boundary to meet an unmet housing need, at least half of our unmet housing need will need to be in a climate-friendly area. So we raised a couple of concerns with this. First, that climate-friendly areas are more set up for multi-unit housing, and these rules require us to plan for a variety of housing, so there's some tension there. And then also this could necessitate us revisiting our climate-friendly areas, either to expand existing ones or designate a new one. And then finally, although a lot of those minimum standards and minimum standards and rebuttable presumptions were made into safe harbors, it's not certain yet whether those will be feasible for us to use. So they are optional tools, but I don't know if they will be realistic tools. Okay, so this timeline here is kind of the full projected timeline for our housing planning work that we need to complete up to our next ONA cycle, so up to our next housing capacity analysis deadline. And as you can see, this is going to take a lot of work, particularly over the next 3 years to meet our mandated deadlines. And because this work is cyclical in nature, it also means that we are going to be wrapping up implementation for this round of planning when we need to start the next round of planning. And then something else I wanted to point out on this slide is that a lot of the work that the public is going to be most interested in, which are like the policy type decisions of how do we address our needs, will come later in this housing production strategy in 2028. So it's still a few years out. So coming back to our handy dandy little image of the ONA planning cycle, as I mentioned before, we need to adopt our housing capacity analysis by the end of 2027. So these are the parts of that cycle that we're going to be focused on for the next 2 years. And then another fun timeline. So this timeline is looking at just the next 2 years and the various steps that we need to complete to address our housing capacity analysis requirements. The city did apply for and was awarded consultant assistance through DLCD to help work on the housing capacity analysis, and then also this contextualized housing need that helps lead up to it. So this timeline on the screen is based on the scope of work that we agreed to with DLCD and the consultant. And we are going to be working with Echo Northwest, which we're really happy about that because Echo is really experienced in this, albeit new rules, but they were on the rulemaking committee. They also completed our 2011 housing study, so they have that history, and then they also have local expertise that was involved in that and somebody that lives here in the community that will be helping. So those are all really good things. DLCD is, however, still finalizing the contract with the consultant, so we're not yet sure when we'll have them on board, but likely not before the end of this month. So this entire draft timeline will need to be re-examined once we know when we can start working with them. And then we will have their help through May of 2027. And while Echo's assistance is going to be critical in helping us to get this done, the amount of DLCD's grant assistance is not going to cover all of the work that's required of us to comply with the rules. So it's still going to take significant staff time to complete this and later stages of the planning work. So we're estimating for this kind of next 2-year part, at least 1.5 FTE from comprehensive planning, as well as expertise and support from other staff across several different work groups.
So I know we're not going to have this question tonight, but it would be helpful to understand what our total cost to implement these rules are and what our total reimbursement from the state is. Not because having this conversation with our state partners can always be a little bit challenging because they don't oftentimes allocate enough resources for cities to do this work.
So I can answer right now that we're not going to be reimbursed for anything. The state is going to pay Echo Northwest directly. So that money is not passing through us. So any of the costs to the city will be what we spend ourselves. But we can get you an estimate of what that would likely cost.
Yeah, and in the range over the couple of years that now that we're effectively having to, I don't know if this is a net new program would be the right way to describe it, but we're moving to a much more rigid residential planning cycle.
Yeah, I mean, we would be doing this work anyway, even if it was locally driven. As Katie said, our plan is coming to the end of its 20-year timeframe. It's something that I had anticipated we would start doing a few years ago. We've had to delay, as Katie said, because of the rulemaking. So we definitely would be doing it, but sort of it's much more rigorous and extra work beyond what we would have done had they not gone through the rulemaking.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Rodley.
Well, and I mean, this is where we just sort of pontificate and whine, or where I pontificate and whine. I'm also not entirely convinced that this is going to get us to more housing faster. Like the reality is every time we have to go back and regroup and do new math and follow new rules, it takes us away from being able to just keep moving forward. Even though I think you all are fantastic and you do a great job of like already like, okay, this is where this is going to intersect with CFEC and all of that. I just want everybody to sit down for a minute and let us do what we do. So, like I said, I was going to do a little bit of whining, maybe for everybody else, and then we'll just keep marching forward.
Anybody else? There will be a little bit of pontificating up here. Go ahead, Councilor Stout.
So here, I won't get off that train either. I really appreciate the context, Sandy, about how we would probably want to do this work anyway. And I think this is a neat opportunity. As much as I'm not a fan of state mandates, I think it's a neat opportunity to ask the question often and early, especially of council, of what do we want Springfield to look like? Because, yeah, I might not love the brute force method that's being used by the state, but I think there is an opportunity to ask, council, like, hey, what do we want this beautiful community to look like? It's when we are adding this housing capacity. And I think that's something that all of us enjoy weighing in on and are interested in weighing in on. The one question I do have as we go forward, and you can answer this now or later on, is to what degree does transportation planning change in our capacity analysis? And the reason I ask that is it's a lot easier to have an increase in capacity if you're next to multiple different kinds of transportation. So I'm just kind of curious, how is that laid out in this, if it is yet? And it can be, hey, I'll let you know when it comes up.
Yeah, so I'm not didn't have it in my plan, so I'll try and address it now. And Sandy can probably hop in with if there are parts of the TSP that need to think about that because I'm not as familiar with it. But part of what these rules require is that we have to look at location of housing, and it wants us to think a lot more about planning for housing near assets. And one of those particularly is transportation. So it does lead us in that direction but then I think, we run into the issue of if we need to expand into areas that we don't have transportation.
Yeah, I'll add, since you've given me the opportunity, to when I had laid out our work program 5 years ago for comprehensive planning, the idea was we would have the housing work done when we got to updating our transportation system plan. That will not be the case. And Katie hasn't really explained yet, but even when we get to the end of the capacity analysis, we won't yet know if we're expanding the urban growth boundary or not. That will come later. Whereas in the past, we would have had that figured out earlier. So it's unfortunate timing in that we'll be having to, when we are updating our transportation system plan, we'll have to be making assumptions about where we're going to accommodate this additional population that we're planning for without having finished the housing work to know where they're going to need to go. So we'll figure it out, but that is one unfortunate outcome of the delay in getting to the housing work.
Okay, I'm going to hold us back. I'm looking at the clock. We still have 18 minutes left, and I think you got quite a few slides. And I think by the time we start commenting, we're going to have a lot to say. So
that does lead well into where I was because state's resources aren't going to fully cover this, so we'll need to spend staff time doing it. And then also because those resources are limited, we're needing to push out some of the things until later, which Sandy was alluding to. That's something that's allowed by these new rules, but kind of not what we had contemplated. So with that all in mind, I'm going to dive a little bit more into the various components of this near term next 2 years work, starting with how much housing we need to plan for. So as I mentioned before, we last completed this housing planning in 2011. So the results of that are on the left side of this slide. So that was number of housing units that we'd need between 2010 and 2030. We were estimating just under or planning for just under 6,000, 51% of that being for households with low incomes, so that 80% of the area median income level or below, 60% of it being single unit types and 40% multi-unit. And the numbers on the right-hand side of the slide are those state provided production targets that are now being determined at the state level. And so the state's methodology calculates things at a state and a regional level, and then it allocates out to cities from there so that each city is planning for its quote unquote fair share of housing. It also explicitly considers underproduction, housing that's assumed to be lost to vacation or second homes, and then housing for people experiencing homelessness. And so all of that together has resulted in these really ambitious targets, especially at lower income levels. The state numbers also include this front-loaded production target for the first 8 years, which is that 466 units at the bottom of the slide. So that is asking us to plan for 55% of our total need for the next 20 years in the next 8 years. And that's what the state will actually be looking at when they're evaluating our progress. And so overall, we're going to be planning for more housing, almost 1,000 units more than the last time around, and then more housing at lower income levels. And particularly, I want to draw your attention to the almost 2,000 units at the 0 to 30% AMI level that we're to plan for. So those are basically units of housing for people experiencing homelessness. And we've talked about this before, but this is really significant because housing at these lower income levels, and especially when you get down to that level, really needs pretty significant subsidy to move forward. And to ground that a little bit in what we're actually seeing in Springfield. So this is an image in one of the attachments, I think attachment 3 in your packet. And this is showing our housing units that are permitted. The top left bar chart is showing over the last decade per year how many housing units we've permitted. And as you can see, we've only gone over that 466 units per year target one time. That was mostly, I think, Marcola Meadows homes coming online. And otherwise, we've been averaging around 242 units per year. And then if you look at income qualified housing, which is that bottom left bar chart, that 0 to 80% AMI level, it looks even more challenging to meet those state targets. And again, this is part of what's really hard about these rules is the city doesn't build housing and we don't control a lot of the elements that determine how much housing gets built. And in particular with income qualified housing, a lot of that is heavily reliant on state level subsidy to move forward. Okay, so diving back a little more deeply into these elements that we're going to be looking at. So the contextualized housing need, again, this is a report that takes those housing production targets from the state and adds localized context. And ultimately, the purpose of that is to help us to determine the types, characteristics, and locations of housing that we need. So types are what we would traditionally think of typology, single unit, middle housing, multi-unit. Characteristics is a little bit more of a squishy thing. It includes some physical characteristics like accessibility, things that we would traditionally think about like tenure options and affordability. But then it also includes some really subjective things like trauma-informed design that we don't necessarily have a great way of tracking or affecting. So that one's kind of a challenge. And then locations, as we sort of were responding to Councillor Stout's question, is thinking about providing choice in where we locate housing, and then also thinking about putting housing in proximity to community assets and minimizing harms. So transportation access being one of those. And then I'm not going to get too deeply into this slide for the sake of time, but these are just the various elements of the contextualized housing need that we need to look at. So a market analysis, looking at past discriminatory actions, and then assessing fair housing choice. And to do this, we're going to need to look at both quantitative and qualitative data, including community input. So this is going to be kind of a key point in this whole process for community input. Then moving into the housing capacity analysis. So this is where we'll inventory the buildable residential lands and determine the housing types that we need. And then we will assess whether we have sufficient capacity in our buildable lands for that housing over the next 20 years. So that's the capacity side of this assessment. And then we will take those state provided production targets and the contextualized housing need to determine what the types of housing we need are. And then those will be put together in this residential lands needs analysis report where we compare our capacity with our need. And the housing capacity analysis needs to be adopted into the comprehensive plan. And so as we alluded to before, because of the limits on the consultant assistance and the time that we have to do this, this report is going to differ from ones in the past in that it won't include the policy actions to actually address how we meet any unmet need. So that is what's going to come later. So this will just tell us if we have a capacity issue and where, which, as Sandy mentioned, also means that a determination about whether we need to do an urban growth boundary expansion is getting pushed out to a later phase of this planning work than we would have done under the old paradigm or if we had more resources. And then this chart here is just kind of helping to understand the concept of the development ready lands and showing the difference between the buildable land inventory that we complete as part of the housing capacity analysis and this new inventory that we need to identify. So development ready lands are a subset of our buildable lands, and it is the land that is available for housing development in the next 8 years. So in our current cycle. And to figure that out, we look at things like annexation, zoning, and proximity to needed infrastructure. And so this is also one of the areas where, given the limited consultant assistance, the city will be doing more of this work, and the consultant will be helping us with a methodology. And for this, we're going to need to coordinate with the Springfield Utility Board and then also internally with our capital improvement program and public facilities plans to better understand land and existing infrastructure. And then this timeline here is showing kind of our proposed engagement points through these next 2 years. So city staff is primarily going to lead community engagement for this project. And this timeline is showing approximately when and how often we anticipate engaging with the community, the Planning Commission, and the council for this part of the work. And once again, this is going to need to be adjusted once we figure out when ECHO can start working on this. So similar to other recent state mandates, the owner rules emphasize community engagement with particular attention to protected classes and named communities, including communities of color, low-income communities, and individuals with disabilities and tribal communities. And so, as I mentioned before, the contextualized housing need is kind of a key point for engagement in this next couple of years. And that's based both on the state's rules and because for the contextualized housing need, we're really asking, what is it that the community needs housing wise? And so we have 2 points of community input planned around that, one to help feed into this report, and then another where we're asking the community, how does this draft report look? And then the other points for community input are around reviewing the draft residential land needs analysis. So again, that's where we compare the capacity of our lands with how much and what kind of housing we need. And that's an important point for input because it's going to inform later what we do in this housing production strategy action report, and also whether we need to consider an urban growth boundary expansion. And then there's another opportunity that we've identified through the adoption process where people can provide input. So a little bit about the adoption process. The housing capacity analysis is a land use decision, and it's going to require co-adoption with the Board of County Commissioners, which means that we'll need at least 6 months to get through that process. And so all of this work needs to be wrapped up by summer of 2027 in order to go to the Planning Commission over the summer of 2027 and to the Council and the Board of County Commissioners fall of 2027. And that is, I want to acknowledge up front, an extremely tight timeline, and we don't know at this point if we can make that timeline, but we are endeavoring forward under that hope and assumption. And now we're on the last slide. So with that, I'll turn it back over for any more questions questions or comments. We did have 2 questions for your input if you have any tonight. So the first one being if you have any thoughts on the draft engagement timeline, which is this one on the previous slide, particularly around the key points for input from the community. And then also if you have any feedback on the draft key messages for the project, which are attachment 2.
Councilor Rodley.
Thank you. So first of all, I really appreciate you all. And you all are going to be the ones doing this hard work. And so I want to support that and not be a blocker. You talked about the engagement timeline. I will say that the irony is not lost on me that we have to go out into the community and ask them what they need when we are being told by the state exactly what we need to do. So that feels a little bit strange to me. I think if I think about the analysis for the engagement timeline, I'm going to support it and I'm happy to help with it. And I also think that in this case, because of just how huge this is, I would advocate for us doing the bare minimum. In terms of those mandated pieces that we're not getting any funding for, and putting what energy we have to into what actually is going to benefit Springfield and benefit the residents of Springfield. Because like you said very sweetly, this doesn't actually build any housing. This just gives us things on paper that are going to say that we're ready to build housing when we already know that we are leaning in hard and we are ready to build housing. So I'm going to advocate for doing the minimum. And in terms of the key messages, my big key message is they're making us do this, but that's not helpful. So maybe you all will have better ideas for what the key message is.
Thank you for those, Councilor Rodley. I guess, the questions that I have, first and foremost, it feels like the rules keep changing, and it feels like the timelines keep getting shorter. And I guess the one thought that I have, and I know you can't answer this, but is how sure are we that these are the rules that we're going to be? Yeah, I mean, it's like the rules of the game keep changing, and it's hard to make decisions when it's oh, but wait, there's more. And then I guess I appreciate what Councilor Rodley said in that, this feels like it's forced. Although at the same token, I don't know what the gap is between what we already know we need and what we would already want to do. If the state wasn't involved in this at all, what would we be already doing versus what the state's mandating? And I just don't know how big of a gap that is. And so that's the thing that I keep coming back to is I don't like the mandate any better than anybody else. And I largely agree with Councilor Rodley. I just don't know if it's one of those things where it's we're pushing back against the mandate, but if they're just mandating what we would more or less be doing anyway, then it's really a timeline thing. My biggest concern is it feels like that moving target. And so going forward, city staff is going to do a whole bunch of work, and we're going to try and hit this deadline that may not even be possible by next summer. And yet 3 months from now, 6 months from now, we could get a whole new, let's just change these yet again. And so that's what's challenging to me. And I don't know if you can speak to any of that, but the biggest thing that I'm curious that you might be able to speak to is that gap.
Yeah, I can speak to the gap at least. I think it's one of those situations where it's the devil's in the details. I think the big elements of what we're being required to do, as Sandy said, are what we would want to do anyways. But I think it comes down to the details. I mean, it's really, really prescriptive about things like the community engagement we need to do, and that we need to specifically respond to every event that we do, and what did we learn from it, and how are we applying it. And it's just kind of stuff like that that gets really administratively burdensome. So I think the big picture we would do a lot of those things. It's just like the little hoops within each one of those that is taking up the capacity. And then Sandy, I don't know if you had anything to add about it. Okay.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like you're not imagining things. The details are getting more complicated and the timelines are getting shorter. Anybody else? Councilor Mo.
Yes. I see Echo Northwest being consultants on a lot of things out there, and we're dependent on them. If they don't produce, we don't go anywhere. And do they have the resources to do that? Because I don't know much about them except they do a lot of studies for our city plus others. And I want to make sure that they're able to provide what we need in a timely manner.
Yeah, I will say Echo's really big. So things that we've worked on with them for one thing, like the task force, the fiscal task force, those are different people than we're working with on the housing thing. And the kind of lead project manager on the housing stuff, like this is what she does. This is all she does.
And I'll add, she advocated to work with Springfield. The state wasn't necessarily, because there's several consultants, and so they do a match between consultant and the city, and Beth Goodman really advocated to work with us. And she worked on our previous study. So I think the learning curve will be very small in terms of our community. She already knows our community. She knows our GIS. She knows our staff. The rules, I mean, she's learning along with everybody else. Although, like as Katie said, she was on the advisory committee. So are we ever going to get all that we want from a consultant? Probably not. But I think it's as good as we're going to hope for is what my expectation is.
All right. Yeah, I think we all have a lot of opinions on this. One of the things that we have to take away from this is continuing the legislative advocacy around, housing policy. Even though we've said for years, help cities streamline the work for cities, simplify it. Like we have to keep repeating this because the pace that they're asking the staffs to work in the state of Oregon is just not sustainable. And I want to start, I guess, by recognizing the amount of work that this is to deliver and understanding that we're all working under the assumption that this is a pretty pro-housing community, and all this work may not deliver another unit of housing. I think the other piece that I'm concerned about at the state level is all the regulatory changes we've made. It sort of has created a Gordian knot of, regulations and the question that I have is, does somebody actually understand what the new state rules actually say? And I know that we can continue to add to this work, and I'm looking for, at least feedback from the city staff at some point that says, hey, look, this has become so big and broad and consuming that we don't really understand what the state's asking for us, because that's a place as elected officials we can step in and continue to raise with our state delegations that this is just not a sustainable pace. When I think about the feedback and the plan, I mean, it looks good. Like we're going to start and we're going to work this as best we can. The questions that I really jumped out to me were just the importance of thinking about where those jurisdictional boundaries, not the city of Springfield's are, but we're talking about significant more housing units and making sure that that's part of the conversation too. The example that I think of is Jasper Natron specifically, right? We know that the school district is having enrollment problems, and there's a lot of residential buildable land that is down that way and is technically in a different school district boundary, right? So as we talk about how do we wrap this up in kind of a sustainable community, right? Like some of those policy issues would help us, long term where appropriate. When I read the talking points to the public, I think have to be a lot more, I guess, cleaner. Like they read very technical to me, if that makes sense. and really backing the public up and talking about what we're actually doing. I think the message I didn't see in them was really talking that this is about all housing, like housing across the city at all levels, including home ownership. Sometimes when housing gets talked about as in the public, it sounds like it's more 0 to 30% AMI than it is about the whole spectrum of housing, which is really where the discussion is. And when I read the talking points, I didn't really feel like that part come through. And then I think the last piece of feedback that I had is just the importance of talking about the difference between income levels in housing and maybe housing products, because these things as housing begins to get more diversified, like I'm not sure the public really understands what's getting built and why. And I consistently hear people bring up concerns where they misconstrue what workforce housing is, what subsidized housing is. Are we still pursuing home ownership? Like all the different pieces of it. And I think just coming up about 5 steps and really getting clear about like, hey, this is what this project is, and it encompasses the whole section of housing would be really helpful. And then please, in this entire conversation, don't lose the home ownership piece of it, right? That is the one place that we do have to really build, basically income for people and stability on what their sort of housing payments are, right? Like renting can be really, really tough right now. And, if we sort of overcorrect or over rotate towards one part of this, it's going to become, like really tough. And really, we want to be as flexible as possible and make it as easy as possible to build housing in Springfield. Go ahead.
I don't want to take more time. I really appreciate the call out around home ownership. Because I think it is, we talk about housing and we talk about units and it doesn't necessarily feel like homes. But back to the piece about whatever the percentage of the 0 to 30%, and you started to call it out, but I just think for like future people, when we're in a public meeting, future council, future folks, like that is housing that's going to need additional like wraparound services and very substantial kind of public-private partnerships and weaving together of things. And that's going to take probably a lot more capacity than we currently have to do that work. Knowing as somebody who sits on the home consortium board, and we try to figure out how to do that with limited amounts of funding, and you hit the nail on the head, and that some of that funding has to come from the state. So I'm just putting a pin in that for future people, and I don't know that answers any of your questions. Just that's going to be a big lift in addition to the rest of this.
I think that may be all the input we have. Did you get enough input?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Hey, here's this big project. All right. I'm going to adjourn the work session, and then we are going to reconfigure into a CETA meeting. So we'll need to pause for about a couple of minutes.
I'm going to run for